Hi, my name is Brendan Murphy and I'm a statistician in the Census Division. Today I'll be introducing the results from the recent census on housing in Ireland. This profile on housing in Ireland provides a snapshot of the housing stock on census night in April last year. The census collects data about both the population and housing. Data on housing is collected in two ways. First, census enumerators identify all potential dwellings in their area and confirm whether each dwelling is occupied or unoccupied. Second, in dwellings which are occupied on census night, the householders complete the census form. This provides additional information about the dwelling and its residents, such as the year the property was built and whether the households own or rent their accommodation. This first section looks at the housing stock and whether homes are occupied or unoccupied on census night. This is information collected by the enumerator over the 10 weeks they spend delivering and collecting census forms. The housing stock is made up of all permanent homes that are in a livable condition. Caravans and mobile homes are not included in the housing stock. Neither are communal establishments such as hotels or nursing homes. Derelict buildings and homes that are under construction are also excluded. There are three types of unoccupied dwellings. The first type are homes where the residents are away on census night. They are categorised as temporarily absent. The second type are vacant dwellings, which includes short-term vacancy, such as a void period in between tenancies in a rental property, and longer-term vacancy, where there have been no occupants for months or years in some cases. The third type of unoccupied dwellings are holiday homes, which are often found in coastal areas and will be used occasionally by the owners or as short-term lets. The housing stock in 2022 was over 2.1 million, up 5% from the 2016 census. For context, the population increased by 8% over that period. The number of occupied dwellings increased by 8% in line with the population increase, while vacant dwellings fell by 20,000, 11%. There were also nearly 67,000 unoccupied holiday homes, up 8%. The housing stock increased in all counties. The largest increases were in the east of Ireland, primarily around Dublin. The fastest growth in the housing stock was recorded in Meath and Kildare, up by over 11% in both counties. And in these counties, the population was also up by over 10%. In counties such as Tipperary, Donegal and Leitrim, the population and the number of occupied dwellings was increasing at more than twice the rate of the housing stock. For example, in Leitrim, the housing stock went up by 2%, the population went up by 10%, and the number of vacant dwellings went down by 20%. This section looks at data about homes that was primarily captured on the census form. The number of occupied dwellings that were built between 2016 and the 2022 census was over 93,000, nearly twice as high as the number of homes built between 2011 and 2015. But it is only a fraction of the number that were built between 2001 and 2010. While the number of homes built is up 90%, within that we can see that the number of houses built increased by 100%, while apartments increased by 50%. There has been a big shift in the main type of central heating used by new homes. In older homes, oil was much more common type of fuel used for heating. However, in homes built since 2016, we're much more likely to use electricity. We can see that nearly half of homes built between 2016 and last year's census used electricity as the main type of central heating, compared to just 10% of older dwellings. Just 9% of new homes used oil, compared to over 40% of older dwellings. In total, approximately 1 in 3 homes use natural gas to fuel their central heating. This is still the case among new homes. Very few new homes use solid fuels such as coal, peat or wood, while 7% of new homes reported their main type of fuel for central heating as other, compared with just 1% of older dwellings. On closer inspection, most of these homes also reported using an air source heat pump as a form of renewable energy. For the first time in the census, a question was asked about renewable energy. This revealed that just under 1 in 4 homes used renewable energy sources. Wood was by far the most common renewable energy source used, particularly in older dwellings, and was used by nearly 250,000 homes. Newly built homes were much more likely to use renewable energy sources than older homes. In these newer dwellings, solar panels and heat pumps were more commonly used than wood. In total, the use of solar panels was reported by 6% of all households, ranging from 3% in Dublin City to 11% in Meath. However, in new builds, solar panel usage was over 30%, with a large variation across the country. In Meath, South Dublin and Fingal, around 45% of new builds used solar panels, whereas in Roscommon, Leitrim and Kerry it was around 10%. The number of homes with a broadband connection, either fixed line or mobile, was 1.46 million, or 79% of all homes. In total, 83% of homes had an internet connection. There was a clear difference in internet connectivity by the age of the householder. Households headed by someone aged between 30 and 44 years were least likely to not have an internet not have an internet connection at just 3%, whereas 1 in 3 people aged 65 or over and living alone had no internet. The question on internet connectivity was expanded in this census. Part of it asked about the different devices in the household that are connected to the internet. This replaced the previous census question, which asked if the household had a personal computer. Just 26% of households with an internet connection used a desktop PC, compared to 69% who used a laptop. Mobile phones were the type of device most often used to access the internet in 87% of homes, while half used tablets. Smart TVs were used by 59% of households, while 28% had video consoles that accessed the internet. So this next section looks at changes in home ownership and rent. The total number of owner-occupied homes increased, but home ownership rates fell from 68% to 66%, as the total number of households living in rental accommodation increased by 44,000 to over 500,000. The number of homes owned with a mortgage fell slightly, while the number of homes owned without a mortgage was up 11% to nearly 680,000. The total number of occupied rental properties includes over 330,000 rented from a private landlord, 153,000 local authority properties, and almost 30,000 rented from a voluntary housing body. The number of homes rented from a private landlord increased by 7%. In general, private rental accommodation was more common among younger households. However, compared with the previous census, large increases were recorded in the number of older persons living in rental accommodation. 17,000 householders aged 65 and over were in private rental accommodation, up 83%. And there were 69% more households headed by a person aged 60 to 64 years of age. To better understand what was happening here, in 2016, there were about 11,000 55 to 59-year-olds in renting, and 6 years later, there were about 11,000 60 to 64-year-olds renting, which suggests that people in their late 50s who were renting in the previous census were still renting in last year's census. The rates of home ownership varied by the age of the head of the household. Younger people were more likely to rent, while older people were more likely to own their home. The general trend over the last few censuses is that people are getting older before owning their home. Back in the 1991 census, half of householders owned their home, either with or without a mortgage, by the age of 26. This age, which marks the changeover between home ownership and renting, increased to 35 in the 2016 census and was 36 in the census last year. 2/3 of householders owned their homes by the age of 44 in 2022, up from age 41 in 2016. And the age at which the majority of householders owned their dwelling outright stood at 59 years last year. The average rent in dwellings rented from a private landlord increased to €273 per week, up 37% from €200 per week. Between 2011 and 2016, the average weekly rent rose by 17% from €171 in 2011. The highest average rents were in Dublin. And to narrow it down, the average weekly rent was €442 per week, which works out at nearly €1,900 per month. The lowest average weekly rent was in Donegal at €134 per week. Leading up to the 2016 census, rents were rising fastest in and around Dublin. But in this census, rent rose fastest in Longford, up 51% to €152 per week, followed by Louth, Westmeath and Clare, all up 47%. This section will look at vacancy. A dwelling is classed as vacant by census enumerators if it is unoccupied on census night, it is not used as a holiday home, and is not usually inhabited by occupants who are temporarily absent at the time of the census. The dwelling has to be in a livable condition. Dilapidated properties, for example, where the roof is collapsed, would not be included. Neither would buildings under construction where the windows or doors haven't been installed. However, it is a point-in-time indicator taken on census night, so it would include homes that were being sold and rental properties that were between tenancies. The census vacancy definition has been used over several censuses, which enables comparisons over time. We can see that the housing stock increased rapidly during the 1990s and continued until after the 2006 census. This resulted in an even faster growth in the number of vacant dwellings. However, as growth in the housing stock slowed between the 2011 and 2016 censuses, the number of vacant dwellings started to decline. The number of vacant homes peaked at over 230,000 in 2011. By last year, the number of vacant dwellings had fallen to 163,000. It is possible to link properties that were vacant in the 2022 census back to the 2016 census dataset and see what their status was then. In this way, we can identify properties that were vacant in both 2016 and 2022. This can then be used as an indicator of long-term vacancies. There were just under 48,000 homes vacant in both censuses, about 2% of the housing stock. Back in the 2016 census, there were 65,000 homes vacant in both 2011 and 2016, meaning 3% of the housing stock at the time. There were 23,000 dwellings vacant in all three censuses, 2011, 2016 and 2022, indicating that they may have been vacant over an 11-year period. In Dublin and the surrounding counties of Meath, Kildare and Wicklow, and in Cork City and Galway City, just 1% of homes were vacant last year and also vacant in 2016. Leitrim, Mayo and Roscommon were the three counties with the highest proportion of vacant homes in both census years at 6%. A more detailed breakdown by local electoral area shows that the proportion of homes vacant in both 2016 and 2022 censuses was lowest at less than 0.5% in parts of Dublin and Kildare. For example, in the Lucan South Dublin LEA, 38 homes were vacant in 2016 and were still vacant in 2022 out of a housing stock of 18,000. The publication with detailed graphs, maps and interactive tables is available online at www.cso.ie, along with the accompanying press releases, methodological notes and FAQs on housing and vacancy. Inquiries about the census results can be sent to census@cso.ie. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's presentation. The next results from the census on households, families and childcare will be published at the end of August.